Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric, this being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Clarice. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, basically, after the events of last episode with Welling dying in their custody, the VICAP team is under investigation trying to see who's at fault here. So you have this agent, Herman, who's basically, interviewing everybody one at a time. But especially we kind of focus on him in particular with his interview with Clarice, because he's saying, he's trying to turn Clarice against Crenler, or against Paul, trying to say, oh, this kind of fell on Paul. Like, the fact of the matter is, you always kind of felt like there was more to this investigation, but he kind of shut you down. You deserve more. You can be more. Like, you can just be you can be cut free, let loose to do what you do. If Crenler wasn't there in your way, it's like, hey, you should join. When this is all said and done, we take VICAP down, you can come join Violent Crimes. But then later on, the way when he's talking to Paul, he's like, oh yeah, like this conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. It's like, so even you don't believe it. He was just saying that because he knew that, Clarice believed it. So he knew that he could use that as an opportunity of like, hey, no one here listens to you, but I will. It's also suggesting like, oh, Paul, his resentment against you is because you caught Buffalo Bill before he did. So it's also kind of reaffirming some of the stuff she already believes is kind of there. So he's kind of using that. He could see how Clarice feels and is kind of arming that against Paul. But then he kind of arms Ardelia against Clarice by being like, hey, bring Ardelia in, make sure Clarice sees. And obviously Clarice is like, hey, she even talks about the fact that her and Ardelia have never been in a situation before where they're kind of like on opposite sides of things. Because usually like she could go to Ardelia for help and it's just like, this is your friend and your roommate. I mean, from what we've seen, she's kind of the only friend Clarice has. Maybe that's by design, maybe, But it is, the fact is that that's like the only friend she has. And in this situation, she doesn't have anyone to necessarily turn to under these circumstances. So VICAP is basically put on the phone line. But for Clarice, it's like, she can't just sit back and wait. For one, hey, there's a killer out there. Whoever killed Welling is still responsible for the 3 women he murdered. So, like, we need to find them. And it's like, the only way to keep VICAP alive and solve this is if we find out who's behind all this, which Esquivel and Tripodi are with her as well. Because it's like, I love Tripodi being like, oh yeah, so yeah, one of you is a psychopath whisperer and one of you is a sharpshooter. But you probably want to bring someone who's got 10 years in a bureau, on shotguns. So. But I'm wondering is him and Murray, which I don't think they really went into like how long Esquivel's been a part of the team. He must be like prior to Clarice, like this squad. Esquivel was probably like the newbie of the team. The way they kind of, obviously they've been a team probably for a good while now, but he's still kind of like the fresh face of the group now. Clarice is, but I would expect like Paul and Murray go back, but we don't. Well, at least it shows that Tripodi's like been a part of things for at least a while, at least since I would have never expected that to be like, oh, he's been a part of the Bureau for like 10 years. I would have never expected that. But nevertheless, obviously when it comes to this investigation, it also brings, Tripodi to bring up stuff of like, you should trust in Crenler, which for Clarice, it's like, I'm tired of being told, like, ever since I've been a part of this team, all I've been told is who and what I should trust. The fact of the matter is, why? Like, none of you've ever trusted me. I told Paul from the beginning that this was something more, but he didn't want to listen to me, whether that's just because he's upset because of the whole situation with Buffalo Bill, me finding him before Paul could, or that he's the AG's, good soldier boy, which probably was like, whoa. But it's like, because for like, that's also the complicated thing in this. I'm like, why is he suffering the ramifications of like, because also like Herman was throwing that in his face to a certain extent, but it's also like the AG's the one that wanted this wrapped up so damn quickly about, but also it's like the AG needs to let this fall on somebody's head. So it just kind of like, I'm sure she probably put in a word to be like, yeah, don't let Clarice, because also like this is her personal squad. If so, she needs someone to take the fall for it, because if not, it kind of will throw shade back at her. She's already like, we already saw, what was it, last episode, how they kind of depicted her about the whole thing, the VICAP team. And, because she's talked about how like basically she wasn't able to kind of keep her cool. So it just makes her seem like a raving mother who kind of went through the experience that she did, with the whole Catherine thing. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting aspect of like, why now it's like, and I think the safe face to be like, okay, the good I can do, I can't have my position and what I'm trying to do jeopardized by this potential investigation because someone's going to have to take the fall for it, which, like I said, it's just interesting, like, with Clarice of how, because obviously these are a lot of her own personal feelings. It is a thing of she is pissed and like no one listened to her. Like, Paul was wrong then. He was kind of wrong under a lot of these circumstances. But even she apologizes and Travagli's like, no, I get it. It's a complicated situation. You were right. No one did kind of want to listen to you, but still. Even later on, it was an interesting thing where Tripati's the one that was talking to Clarice about the fact is that you should trust that Paul is a loyal person. Like he goes for bat for his team. It's like, yes, like you were a trainee and stuff like that, but they threw you to the wolves when they basically had you interview with a cannibal, and then they had the nerve to pat you on the back when you came back alive. It's like Paul didn't like what they did that they did that to you. He actually really hated it, and also like. Paul would have never put you in that position. Like they literally threw you to a cannibalistic wolf who now knows too much about you, who knows a little too much about you because you had to open yourself up, even though that was kind of the agreement not to. But it's still a thing of they could have picked anyone, but they picked you, a trainee, to throw to the wolves. Like I think that speaks volumes about how like a lot of the higher ups handle things. And I really also thought it was pretty dope the conversation that Paul and her had, where it's like. Obviously, he explains, like, him and Herman have history, and we got that conversation. I even loved, it was kind of a little dickish, but I love it. It's like, oh, how are you enjoying my office? And Herman's like, it's stale in here. And then, like, you have Paul got his kit back, put his legs up. But I thought that was an interesting conversation between them because it's like, basically, to get this particular, Jerry the Jeweler, he's like, those guys with the names back then, basically, they offered him something and then like also got him a blowjob from a prostitute or something like that. And basically that led to him becoming a good CI and they were able to bust someone even bigger. Paul got reprimanded for it. Herman got a promotion for it. So it's like, yeah, you've always been the type to not want to ever get your hands dirty, but like let others do the dirty work for you, yet benefit from it. And for him, it's like, that's all you're doing right now. You're trying to get my team destroyed because you want my squad. You want all these talented people on your team because you want it to be another notch on your belt of your success as you're climbing the ladder, But talking to Clarice, it's like, I forgot how the conversation started, but basically it led to a whole thing of, oh, are you talking about Herman, or are you talking about me and you? Because he's like, you might think I had issues with you finding Buffalo Bill before us. And he corrects himself, me. But it's like, it's not about that. You are a trainee. You were inexperienced. And you went to Buffalo Bill's by yourself, not telling anyone where you were. Like, not only did you put your own life in danger, you would have put the lives of any other agent who came looking for you in danger. And then and I love that line of, the hardest thing about this job is realizing it's not all about you. And that's the thing. Like, yes, Clarice has made it about the victims and saying like, oh, these are about 3 women. But at the same time, it has been a thing of, what has the conversation been? They haven't been listening to me. It's like, yeah. Also, like, Clarice has a hard time working with people. I mean, and this is just me pulling this from the movies. Once again, I don't know if I need to look into it, like, some of the differences between the movie and the book. But it's like, even in the movie, like, Clarice didn't work with yes, she passed information up to the higher chain, but she did a lot of the stuff on her own, whether it was talking to Hannibal, which he would have wanted it that way, but also like everything she did, like she got help from Ardelia, but it was never 100% a team effort, in my opinion. Like, a lot of that movie in retrospect is her working alone, like, so that team effort isn't really there, because I think it's also the thing of, so I think it still was a thing of not too many people were kind of listening to her to a certain extent, but it's like, I think that's only because of the Hannibal angle. If it wasn't for Hannibal at all, they probably wouldn't So, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, like, because even Paul trying to say, like, yeah, any problems I've ever had with you, it's just like the way you've handled stuff. Like, it's not just about my personal feelings, because what you do has an effect on the team. Like, kind of, what they've been trying to drill into her head till now. It's like, we're a team. Trust in that. Like, it has to go both ways. But it's like, obviously, every once in a while, Clarice still kind of strays a little way, and which ultimately kind of backfires in the episode. But we'll get to that soon enough. Because obviously what they were looking into is obviously the doctor who was overseeing because they were trying to find Rebecca, but obviously Rebecca's not letting her position be known. She only letting like her boss at the paper she worked. Didn't even let him know where she was. But luckily they were able to find out that like there was a Marilyn Felker that was kind of overseeing things, and they end up running into her twin sister. It's like, oh, we both work in the medical field, but I'm a nurse and she does bigger and better things. So it's a thing of like, and Clarice is like, oh, she thinks just because you're a nurse, you're lesser than her because she's paving her way as a pioneer, which part of me, I think there's layers of like, you can kind of find commonality in certain regards, like that conversation about Luann and her sister. Like, you can see some parallels to that and like Paul and Clarice, as well as Ardelia's angle as well, because for her, this job is important. Like, obviously she's the one set to investigate everything, especially like figuring out who these killers were and everything. But also at the same time, it's like she has to prove herself. She has done everything she can to get the job Clarice was just offered, for her. So it adds in that angle of who, because she's talking to Hay and she's working with him the entire episode. They end up obviously like do their investigation, end up finding out the names of the both, well, at least the name of the fake name of the lawyer and the fake cop. But it turns out like while they're looking, like who the person who logged in, the actual people kind of gave them the okay. It turned out later on we find out it was Esquivel, but Paul went in and changed it, put his name instead, so that when it's all said and done, he takes the fall. It's like whoever it was, he saved their ass, but Ardelia still goes, he changed evidence, so he tampered with evidence. But at the end of the day, I thought that was an interesting development too between Haynes and Ardelia, because he was like, hey, if you're free, and she's like, yeah, I want to keep this professional between doing my job and the nonsense. But he's like, I'm gonna stop before you kind of embarrass yourself more. It's like, oh, a black coalition thing. And it's like, oh, she's like, okay, cool, I know what but no. And it's like, for him, it's like, this has to be something we kind of work together on, because it's like, hey, we're both black people who, he's like, I've got a major in like biology or something like that. But for him, it's like, I'm still kind of stuck where I am. And the same thing for Ardelia. Ardelia, it's like, I'm gonna make a name for myself. I'm not going to try and reform, restructure, this building. Basically, I'm gonna make a new build. I'm gonna make new opportunities for myself by doing the work. And that way they kind of have no choice but to acknowledge me. But for him, it's like, well, look at your friend Clarice. Like, they put a bright star, shining star on her, and kind of obviously look where you are. So it's a thing of, it's not just going to be good enough to just do the work. You've put in the work, you've put in the time, and you're still here where you are. Like, they've kind of basically locked you away in this room. Once again, you're the cold case file lady, So it is that situation of, you're a black woman, we're black, like, we're not going to get there of our own, so we need to kind of like set stuff up to kind of come together. So I think that was just kind of a development I thought was kind of interesting. And I think that's a development Ardelia kind of makes Clarice kind of knows later on. It's like, when it came to us in class, like, the only thing I didn't do well in was one particular area, and somehow you are able to kind of flourish and I wasn't. It's like, that's kind of showing her like the difference of like, you can kind of get away with doing a lot of stuff that I can't. Like, I have to go above and beyond. I have to be perfect. I have to do the work. It's like, you just gotta get to skate by on just who you are. You wear different skin, and it's like, for Clarice, she's like, sorry, like, I haven't really been, kind of like the best friend of realizing like what you kind of, your struggles, and it's like, what I'm sorry, like, what do I need to do? She was like, just do the work. I think for her, it's like, don't just kind of skate by on just like who you are, like this star that you have shining above you, you know? Because I'm sure like Ardelia's handled it better than most people, I think. But it, of course, it's going to rub you the wrong way when it's like you see someone who is honestly that you're probably, I don't know if she necessarily, she never directly qualifies it like this, but maybe there is some level to it of like, I'm probably more qualified than you are to be where you are, yet you got here just because they kind of chose, the Bureau chose to kind of back you as their shining star, which obviously we've heard the conversation of everyone else from the Bureau was like, oh, yeah, you. But secretly, well, not some secretly and some just a little more profoundly are like, nah, boo you. We don't like that. You know, it's like we hate that you're kind of the star, the celebrity. But like I said, Ardelia never really showed that. But I think it probably is there to some extent. But she's, you know, it's still like, Clarice is my friend. I'm not going to hold that against her. I mean, she was kind of offered this position. Like they kind of forced her, you know, everything she went through with Buffalo Bill. So I think she probably is a little more lax on Clarice about that than most other people are. But, you know, I just thought that was an interesting development, at least, you know, on that front of things. So, I mean, that's a complicated thing because I think they both have their own struggles because it's like, hey, you're both women. I'm sure that's not going to be the easiest thing. Even this is in the 90s, it's still not going to be the easiest thing in what most would consider a boys' club type of situation at the Bureau. Plus, you also have, but there's also the discrepancy of situation of Clarice is white, Ardelia being black. Like there's even more of a like disparity between like, oh, like where they can get in this world alone. Like I'm sure that kind of because even Esquivel was saying like, oh yeah, like they look at our team like, oh, the skirts because of and because of Clarice, but also referring to it and saying like, oh, skirts envy, you know, Beaner being like, you know, because he's like, that's how they see him, you know, sadly. So it is a situation of like this team kind of made up of the made up of who it's made up of like they're always going to look at us a certain way, you know. It's like, why are we such a high level team? Like, because even saying like other teams in the Bureau hate us, but Paul was the one that's like, no, we're all on the same team, which is interesting considering like he kind of hates Herman's guts because Herman hates him, because for him it's like regardless of anything. For him, it's like, Herman, you aren't a cop. You've never been a cop. You're a bureaucrat. 7 years from retirement, this is going to basically be your legacy, that you are the person who never left the building, because it's like you're never out there investigating. Like you worked your way up to the ladder, and you're not coming at this from being a good cop, you know. Because he also kind of threw shade at Paul by being like, oh yeah, I heard you quit drinking or stuff like that. Because he was like, I never believed that you were deserving of your position or something like that. Which I'm wondering, is that kind of like hinting towards Paul's past? Like maybe he was a heavy drinker. Maybe that played a role in why the AG, you know, Ruth was able to kind of get him as part of the team. Like obviously there's a complicated past, like we saw like last episode, there's a picture of him and his kids, so and his wife, so I'm like maybe like his family dynamic situation got completely derailed, but Paul was going to take the fall because Ardelia had brought the evidence of like, hey, here he is, he's Paul changed some stuff, and it's like, hey, okay, give everything to Eddie. She's like, whoa, this was my case. It's like, yeah, you've done a hard thing. We've taken down VICAP. So it shows like, okay, at the end of the day, you were just, because she ended up talking to Clarice about it. It's like, he was just using me. And then Clarice is like, he was just using both of us to go after Paul. Like, this was a personal vendetta for him. It wasn't about, because the fact is, if this was about getting justice, finding out the truth in the heart of the situation, he would not have gotten so excited of, ooh, we're getting to destroy VICAP. It's like, whoa, like you're a little too damn excited to take down your fellow colleagues is kind of the whole point. But also it made Ardelia kind of realize like, all right, like he's not the best person. He isn't a good person, you know, because, you know, Ardelia was just looking for an opportunity. He was offering her like this was like her chance. Hey, I'm doing the work. I'm doing my job and I excel at it. I found out some stuff, thought that would have been enough. But no, like you were just kind of sadly a chess piece in his game, you know, so Paul was going to take the fall, but someone higher up shut it down by being like, yeah, there's what was used to kill Welling was only a little bit that basically he died of a stroke. So their team is off the hook, which you even have Murray later on being like, oh, did you? But he was like, yes, I tampered with the whole Esquivel thing because he was like, they were just going to jam him up. They were going to make him take the fall for all this. So for him, it's like, this is my team. I'm going to look after him. This all happened under my watch anyway. It's like changing, because even Murray was like, yeah, changing one thing here and there. It's like, all right, I can let that slide. But changing a coroner's report, he was like, but Paul was like, I had nothing to do with that. And what scares me the most is I have no idea who did. We're still in the dark because whoever did that has some pull. They don't want us investigating anything. So I think it was a situation of, hey, we put you through the ringer, so we're letting you slide. But, you know, as long as you drop your investigation, we won't be in this situation again. So I'm surprised they didn't just go ahead and let them take the fall. Like, why pull out at the last second, you know? But I guess it was just, like I said, meant to prove a point of, like, you keep investigating. It also, I mean, adds validity to this whole, oh, there's definitely a conspiracy afoot here, you know? If you didn't believe it before, you definitely can't help but believe it. Well, they kind of started believing it more so last episode anyway, but... So there's that side of things. But also, when they ended up checking out Marilyn Felker's place... they ended up finding all this evidence kind of pointing to like, oh, here's the addresses of all the whistleblowers about the clinical trials and everything. But for Clarice, it's like, doesn't it just seem a little odd that like, it was like, because obviously Chapati found like the poison and everything. And it's like, she's like, and that's it. And he's like, yeah, sometimes it just is. And it didn't sit well with Clarice. And then, and I kind of felt like it especially later on, because it's like, wait, she had, a ticket for somewhere 3 days ago, but she never boarded. It's like, obviously for Clarice, like, it just didn't make sense to her because she was like someone who's like Marilyn, who's so meticulous, because what she had noticed it too. She was like, everything in this house was so perfectly perfect that it's just like that one slight deviation and that picture made Clarice go, okay, this is odd, and ended up finding the evidence kind of tying her there. And then also, like, we were also able to find what she used to murder Wellick, like, just like that. It's like, that doesn't, like, someone as meticulous as her, where she really just had the evidence out and about, so it didn't, like, register. And then at the end, she's confronting Luann about, like, oh, would your sister know anyone in this particular area? And Clarice walks over and sees that it's potentially Marilyn in the bed, and she ends up getting drugged, and it gets attacked by Luann. So that's why, because as we saw in the pictures, one of them was in a wheelchair. I'm assuming that was, but that's the thing. What I'm wondering is, like, is the person we're seeing actually Luann, or is that Marilyn? Or, I'm assuming that it actually is Luann, and that the person in the bed was Marilyn. But that's why I'm wondering, like, was Marilyn actually... Because it's like, oh, Marilyn was always... And I guess it's like, maybe this is setting up potentially that, like, Luann had to be the one to take care of her sister. Of like, yeah, my sister was always sick, and she was always the one that got attention. And so that, so she was always kind of spoiled a little bit more with our parents, which spoiled isn't the right word. But that's why I'm wondering, like, is that why Luann's doing all this? Like... She's trying to throw her sister under the bus. Like, because it seems like... I don't know if that's, like... I guess that's supposed to insinuate that maybe she's been out and about either as her sister the entire time. Like, she's been playing the role of both Luann and Marilyn. Or whether that's just, like... Or whether this whole circumstance was a recent thing. Like, what maybe potentially set this all in motion was maybe her getting tired of her sister and just putting her sister in that situation. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, maybe because she always brought up the whole thing of like, oh, Marilyn always pushed the, try to pioneer stuff. So that right there in itself makes me think she's Marilyn, whereas the one that's in the bed is Lynn. Like, it's a little, I'm confused. I'm making this like a lot more confusing, I know, but it's just, that's where that sits with me. I just don't feel like it is what we think it is. That's Luann and the one in the bed's Marilyn. I think it's vice versa. That I don't know. Not unless that is like I said, maybe this is all born from Luann's own resentment towards Marilyn, and like either Marilyn ended up in that situation naturally. Maybe this has something to do with her medical clinical trials, that maybe she did all this because for her sister's sake or something. But obviously she has someone powerful. It might be a situation where someone powerful has someone that's going through either a similar thing. So it's like, do whatever you need to kind of get this handled. And it's like, whoever's connected to Marilyn and Luann might, whatever their circumstances may be, whoever powerful enough is connected to them might be like, all right, we need to clean this up. So they're protecting Marilyn and Luann just so it doesn't eventually lead back to them, you know? That's how I'm seeing it. Like I said, I could be reading too much into it. The interesting thing, though, is that Clarice is literally doing what happened with Buffalo Bill. She's going in alone. You should have told your team. Obviously, you're talking to Tripathi, but Tripathi was like, we're going to go for beers. Like, there's such thing as diminished returns in the sense of, like, I think it was him kind of implying, like, let's kind of save this for, like, tomorrow. Like, you know, you're only going to get so far, like, you know, at this point in time. So just, like, you know. But it's like she made a mistake again, doing exactly what Paul was saying not to do. What you did before was wrong, and you're doing it again. You're going off. But I guess it makes sense. She was like, I was going to investigate something and look into it, but I didn't tell anyone where I was going. So I think this is probably going to be an episode. The next episode is going to be probably a lot of, like, aggravating a lot of her PTSD with the whole Buffalo Bill situation, because now she's being held captive by someone else. So they can't outright kill her, because they probably have to try and figure out what to do, because she's snooping and she's getting too close to it, but she's an FBI agent, so can't look into it too, you know. So it's going to be interesting to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.